While we're in week 14 of our series through 1 Thessalonians, and I left out the key word in the title. I did that for a reason. Okay, so let's suppose you get a phone call. And it's your friend, your neighbor, it's what a relative. And they are stressed out, and it's just bad news. It's bad news. And you know what your first thought is? What do I say? Now listen, sometimes it's best not to say anything. Are you with me? Because you might say the wrong thing. Has anybody in here ever said the wrong thing? And you know, the next week you're like, why did I say that? That was so stupid. Sometimes you just need to be there. Just listen and just talk and listen. But I thought, you know, what would you do? You know, a lot of people, I mean, we all have our own personal medicine cabinets. I mean, for some people, they go on Facebook and they go to social media, and that's how they deal with whatever. Some people go shopping. Spending money feels good. Some people eat. I mean, they just do. That's why chocolate's such a huge seller. It's not just because it's so good. It's just that there's something about your body that craves something in chocolate. It just does. I mean, it's just, you know, it's good. And some people drink. Some people just watch TV. I mean, it's just, or they go to work, get involved in sports. It's just that I'm just saying we have all these things to get us through. No, we do. So Paul, I want to just, you know, we're going to read one verse, 1 Thessalonians 13. Maybe you've already read it in your notes. So Paul gets a phone call. I know it's first century. He didn't get a phone call. I got that. I'm trying to update it a little bit. He got word from Timothy, who made that long trip. Okay, but in today's age, he gets a phone call, and Paul says, "So how's it going?" "Well, you know, Paul, we're stressed. We're distressed. Some of our friends have passed away, and we're just it's wow." So Paul says, "Okay, so let's meet at Starbucks. Let's go get a cup of coffee and let's talk." Okay. So here we are, verse 13. Okay, are you with me? "But we don't want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others who do not have hope," who have no hope. So I thought, you know what, before I get into this, I just sat at my desk, you know, and I'm writing. I'm like, let me just see how many things I can observe just really quick. All right, so I just took one verse, and I didn't write these in your notes. I don't think they're in your notes, but I wrote down 11 observations, because when you read the Bible, you want to observe. So I wrote down, first of all, lack of information could hurt us, because these people are under a lot of stress, and Paul's basically going to tell them, you didn't have to be under all that stress. But see, here's what I know. A lack of information can lead to worry and frustration and confusion. That's where these people were. Second observation, they're brothers. They are believers. Even believers lack necessary information. And we just do. And the information, number 3, has to do with death. So Paul's going to talk, he's going to address the subject of death among believers. A fourth observation is death is not final. That's why we have the word sleep. All of you woke up if you slept last night. Okay? You all woke up. A fifth, the lack of information led to unnecessary grief. Now listen, when someone dies, grief is normal, but there is an unusual normal. All right? I had a dog one time that died. And you know, I think I shed tears for a couple days. Now, if it had been for 2 years, that would have been unreasonable, would it not? I mean, we put a dog down. Carol tells me, she says, you can't take the dog to get it put down. And you can't even bury the dog. You know what I mean? We've done it different ways. One time I dug the hole, and Carol brought it home in a plastic bag. And one time Adam dug the hole. I think, you know, that's all right. That's just the way it is. All right, another observation. people get confused about life after death. The Bible lays it all out. There should be no confusion. And death is sorrowful. It is. But they had hope. They had hope. Paul talked about their hope because they had trusted Christ for salvation and eternal life. Now here's the cool thing. Evidently, Paul's going to encourage them and give them greater hope through an explanation of last day theology. Because verses 14 to 17 are all about last day events. And he winds up in verse 17 now. Comfort other people with these words. All right? Now, I just find that interesting. Now, in the term we use for this is called eschatology. Eschatos is last things, all right? So it's the study of last things. So Paul is going to give them information about last things. Now, your first thought to comfort somebody is usually not, they just need some good theology. Try that sometime. Show up with a book on systematic theology and say, I thought this would be helpful. No, that's probably not the best thing to do, all right? Because you make it fit the situation. And so Paul, their distress was over last day events and death, and so that was the theology Paul gave them. Are you with me? If somebody just got financially in ruins or whatever, probably not looking at last day theology, all right? That's probably not where you want to go. You want to go with something else, all right? But I just find it interesting that Paul felt that theology was the solution. But I also noticed that his emphasis is practical and not prophetic. See, these prophetic people, man, they want to get all these details and they want to see this. Listen, they can find last day events in somebody stubbing their toe in Iran. You know what I mean? That's just the way they are. You can just... No, but Paul's emphasis was pastoral. He wanted people to be helped and give them greater hope. So Paul's low on the details, and he's more on about how it would impact their lives today. An 11th observation is simply this, that hope in the future will give you the power to get through today. Now, that's just what I got out of verse 13. So, what did they need? A theology of the last days. And so what follows is one of the primary passages on last day events in the New Testament. And I think everybody's heard of the movies like Apocalypse or Left Behind and all that. But we're only going to dive so deep. But the Bible does give a lot of details. But we'll break down the passage next week and look at a few current events. But here's what I want to know. That theology is like an Oreo cookie. All right? Because what happens is, understand, the believers here were being pressed by the death of some loved ones, and they were also being pressed by their misunderstanding of future events. Okay, so both of these are hitting them, and so they needed a cushion, and theology was the cushion. Now, come on. If you eat Oreo cookies, the inside is the good part, isn't it? Oh, yeah, you take it apart, and oh, yeah, man, it's really good. That's what theology is. See, I know some people think theology, is so dry and boring. What cookie are you eating? You're not eating, huh? Man. All right, we may have to take that cookie away. We can bring it back in a little bit. We've got to take it away for a while. Man, I'll lose y'all, won't I? But now think about it. In life, If you get diagnosed with an illness or something, or you want to find out what's wrong, you go to a doctor, and then you go to another doctor, and you go to another doctor, because you don't want one opinion, you want two or three, but you go, you do whatever you can to get exact. You want it. So why don't we do that with our theology? That's what this passage is teaching. So I want to do this. I want to go back into the Old Testament for a moment. 1 Samuel, as always, is a book that just intrigues me for a lot of different reasons. The book of Samuel comes on the heels of Judges, where everybody did what was right in his own eye. It's like the country's going to pot. There is no hope. Isn't God going to do something? And that's kind of how the situation was. So we come to 1 Samuel, and the book starts off with a woman named Hannah. Hannah was married to a guy who had another wife, and so there's two wives, and the other wife, and I did a message on her a few weeks ago, so I'm not going to spend much time here. But Hannah was barren. Now think about it. I want you to think of the Oreo cookie again. So you can put it back up. I think we can get through this without getting too whatever. So, the pressure. She's got the other wife who has a boatload of kids making fun of her. Now, you can't take that. Then she has her barrenness. Are you with me? So once again, she is just, I don't have anywhere to turn to but God. So, that's what you find in 1 Samuel chapter 1. She needed a cushion. She needed something to soften the pressure. And that was going to be theology. Now, she needed to learn some things about God. Now, she did. All of us do. All of us do. And she needed to learn that God could start with nothing. She's barren, by the way, right? So she needs to know that. Now, you think it ever crossed her mind that God, when he created the world, started with nothing? I mean, in Genesis chapter 1, when it says that God created the world, it just basically means God created out of nothing the heavens and the earth. He started with nothing. You try that sometime. Now, that would be a cruel task if you're as a dad, wouldn't it? Here, son, why don't you go make a chair? What would? Figure, nah, you get no tools, no lumber. You don't get anything. Go make a chair. All right. Well, when Jesus encountered two disciples on the road to Emmaus after his death, do you recall Luke 24? Highly upset about the events of his death and all that. Highly upset. What did Jesus do? He started teaching them theology about himself out of the Old Testament. The theology about him in the Old Testament was the cushion. Was the cushion. And we all have pressure points. Oh, you know one of the big pressure points? When bad things happen to good people. Books have been written on it. Listen, you're never going to solve that issue. Broken dreams and waiting. Because you see, then the doubts start rolling in. And no one's beyond doubting. In 1981, Leighton Ford, who's the brother-in-law of Billy Graham, he and his wife lost their 21-year-old son. And here's what he said. And I'm just telling you, this guy's written books. He's solid. All right? So I just want to put everybody at ease. He said, I'd be less than honest if I did not tell you that I wish I could just smile and say, I'm thankful for this. For there's a part of me inside that says, it is not right. I say these things inside myself. They fight. There's great hours of great peace and joy. And then there are times when it just closes in and I say, am I doubting God? We all doubt at times. You know, I'm really amazed, though, that we let our doubts get the best of us at times. I've watched guys on construction sites, and I was a little hyperbolic in my sarcasm, but they would do something, be working on something, they'd look at me and they said, can't be done. I'd say, fine, let's roll up all the welding leads, break the crane down and leave, because this job is done. Well, they knew that wasn't totally true, but they said it couldn't be done. You know what? Somehow it got done. And yet people walk away from Christianity all the time and from Jesus because of their doubts. Wow. Toss in the towel. So let's go back to 1 Samuel. And this would be a good homework assignment. It really would. I mean, they were dark days for spiritually for Israel. So let me go back. You remember the story now. Hannah, chapter 1. So I want to draw some things out if I can. And so then Samuel is born. So if you're reading, you know, that's not really doing it for you right now. The birth of a baby. God, we're in trouble right now. You know. I mean, come on. So, now, if you have a Bible or you got a digital, I'm not going to read these passages. Maybe you want to write these. I want you to go home and look at this, all right? So, then you come to chapter 2, verse 11. Okay, so Hannah, after the baby's born, she writes a poem in verses 1 to 10 of chapter 2. Okay, so verse 11, we pick it up. And Samuel is serving the Lord. That's pretty good. But then you get back into verses 12 to 17, and it's depressing. Well, then you get to verses 18 to 21, and Samuel pops back in the picture. And now I'm intrigued. Okay, it's that bad. Samuel's born, Samuel's serving, and now he's back in the picture again. Something's going on here. It's like watching a movie. Why does that guy keep appearing? He must be an important figure. You've said that in a movie before. So I've got to keep reading. So then I go back to 22, and now I find immorality in the church. Wow, Eli's sons are not the best. Okay, so now it's like, whoa. Wow. Then I get to verse 26, and another mention of Samuel. I'm getting the idea the writer's trying to tell me, don't forget about Samuel. And you've done this in watching a movie because you're trying to put all the pieces together, and you remember this guy, and he showed up 3 or 4 times. You know, you're like, hey, he's got something to do here. And then you get on to chapter 3 and verse 1, and you find, well, verses 27 to 36 in chapter 2, you find a judgment. God's going to bring judgment. And then in chapter 3, verse 1, Samuel shows up again. And he served the Lord by assisting Samuel. Now, what are you learning through all this? That God, see, you want God to work in spectacular fashion. We got 4th of July coming up. You want the grand finale to show up, right? You want the fireworks. Because that means God is there. No, this story right here tells me that God is working behind the scenes. Little by little, he is growing a difference maker. And so I'm learning about God. See, you have to always read the narratives in the Old Testament to find out what it's telling you about God, because it's telling you something about him, how he works. You find patterns. And you're like, wow, that's just like God. Wow, yeah, he did that before. He did that before. He did that before. You know, how could you quit reading and throw in the towel? In World War II, okay, you had the Nazis, and they had their anti-aircraft, stuff going off, shooting at the enemy planes, right? And so the Allies are flying planes, Nazis are shooting their anti-aircraft, and the planes are not blowing up. in the air. Interesting. So, one of the pilots got back. His plane didn't blow up. It got hit, and the shell went into the gas tank, but it didn't blow up. So he asked, he said, well, could I have one of those shells, kind of like a souvenir? And they said, well, everything's been sent off to inspections. They want to check them out. And so they ran it down, and they started getting inside of them, and they found several of these shells, and there was no explosives inside, until they found a note wrapped up in one of the shells. And they got somebody to translate it for them, and here's what it said. It's all we can do for now. So the Czechs, who had been forced to work on the shells, just didn't put explosives inside. And it's kind of like just something small, nothing spectacular, right? Quietly doing something to help out. And it's like, hey, that's how God does sometimes. Wow. So cool. When God does the same thing. And that was the salvation, if you will, of a lot of those pilots. Now, it could be that you lose hope because you want God to do the big and dramatic. But God often works in small ways. Well, I want to give you a couple more things here. There's also hope in repentance. All right? 1 Samuel 7:3, Samuel said to the house of all Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, then put away the foreign gods and the Ashtaroth from among you. Direct your heart to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. You know, a lot of people are looking for hope. You know what they need to do? They just need to repent. That's it. That's it. Then there's the hope. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand this, but I want to give you another thing. There's hope in the pastor praying for us. So the people of Israel said to Samuel, do not cease to cry out to the Lord for God, our God for us, that he may save us from the hand of the Philistines. Now, I know we can take that to the extreme. You know, some people think, you know, well, nobody can pray but the pastor. Somebody's sick, call the pastor. No, that's not what it's saying. I think it does communicate to us, though, that people, when they need hope, they need to know that people are praying for them. And I consider it a privilege as well as a responsibility that weekly I pray for everybody who attends New Hope Church. And if you turn in a request, I pray for it. I mean, I just do. All right? And if you don't turn one in, I got a lot of prayers in the Bible. So I'm good, you know, but nonetheless, I think there's hope in prayer. When you stop praying, you've lost hope. All right? All right, let's go to verse 12. Now, I'm just getting this out of this one chapter. I have to move on. All right, now, verse 12, there is hope. It's because I'm a sports guy in the replay booth. All right? I'm just waiting for football. It's only less than 100 days away, so I had to put this in there. So Samuel took a stone, set it up between Mizpah and Shen, and called its name Ebenezer, for he said, till now the Lord has helped us. All right. So when you are under extreme distress and you are being pressured, you need some theology. That's the cushion. So you need to go into your own replay booth and recall how God has come through for you before. A year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Are you with me? That's what they're doing here, because hope is built on theology. And so you need God acting in your life. You just do, because there's hope in the replay booth. Let me move on. Okay, so two kinds of hope. Let me talk about two kinds of hope. Because we all use the word hope. You know, I hope I can find a parking place close to the door because it's pouring down rain. Okay, there's cultural hope and there's Christian hope or biblical hope. Now, there's two different things. Now, cultural hope is unfounded optimism. You are such an optimistic person, you just hope. And you're like, that's it, it's going to happen. All right? A lot of wishful thinking. I mean, and that is, and we use that all the time. You know, I hope it doesn't rain, you know. Hope I can get tickets to the concert. I mean, you know, it's just wishful thinking, all right? You know, I say, well, I hope I could go to this sporting event. Wishful thinking, all right? Now, I want to talk and wind up on Christian hope, biblical hope. That's not wishful thinking. Now, I want you to hang with me, all right? So Hebrews 6:19 says, we have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. Now, that's what you need. An anchor of the soul. An anchor, now everybody knows what an anchor is. It typically, you know, I tell you, when you go on a cruise ship, those anchors are huge. I mean, huge. And, of course, the boat's big. All right, so you got to have a big anchor. All right. Your soul needs an anchor. Now, it does. Biblical hope is an anchor for the soul. All right. Christian hope is absolutely certain of things that are not seen. Now, I've got to be a little brief, so I hope we can get through this and I'll not lose anybody. Now, in the following verses, and you'll have to come back next week, Paul is going to talk about Christianity's most preposterous belief. Now, it is. And if you don't think it is, you go get around some unchurched people this week and share it and see what they think. They're going to think they should probably check you in somewhere. All right? Just saying. All right. So how can we be so certain? And then how are we going to keep from sliding? When we were building our first house, I had a valley on the roof, all right? And it was, you know, it was rain. And so I put some plastic up there to keep the water from going inside the house till I could get the shingles on, or the paper. And Matt, he came over to help me, and I forget how it all happened. All I know is, next thing I know, he had stepped on that plastic. And when you get on plastic that's wet, you know how fast that slides, don't you, huh? And, you know, my mind's just going really quick. And it was only like a 15 feet. And I'm like, he's going down 20 feet and hitting the ground. This isn't going to be good. But that's all going to... And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he was able to grab something, and he stopped. But he needed an anchor. Now, as a believer, listen, I'm telling you, there will be times in your life you don't know how fast you can start sliding. And you'll be like, I'm okay. I'm okay. Go ahead, live in denial. All right, so it's good to have an example. So the writer of Hebrews gives us one. And I won't give you the background of Hebrews, but they were living under a lot of pressure and people were losing their lives. I mean, this is the first century. I mean, if you were a believer, I mean, it's just the way it was. So, Hebrews 6:13. For example, there was God's promise to Abraham, and since there was no one greater to swear by, God took an oath in his own name, saying, I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants beyond number. And then Abraham waited patiently, and he received what God had promised. So Abraham and Sarah have been married for a while, for a few years. He's 75, Sarah is 65, and God says you're going to have a baby. Now, just like most of us would do, they laughed. All right? Abraham laughed to the angel's face, and Sarah laughed in her tent. All right? So they laughed. So at first they didn't believe God, and but you've heard the saying, who laughs last, laughs best. And so God said, well, when the child's born, you're going to name him Isaac, which means laughter, because I'm going to have the last laugh. But besides the laughter, deep down, deep down in his soul, Abraham had an anchor, and he believed God. He believed. In fact, Romans 4 tells us when there was no reason for hope. Now, if God gives you a promise and 22 years later, your wife is still not pregnant, you have come on, is there any reason to believe anymore? He kept hoping, believing that he would become the father of many nations. For God had said to him, that's how many descendants you'll have. And so Abraham's faith did not weaken. Did you ever pray that? God, I pray that my faith would be like Abraham's and never weaken. Never. Even though at about 100 years of age, he figured his body was as good as dead. So was Sarah's womb. But he never wavered in believing God's promise. In fact, his faith grew stronger. In other words, so after 22 years, his faith is stronger than it was when God gave it to him. Now, we have to admit, if you're honest, most of us say, well, my faith would probably be a lot less. It would have been shaken. Well, he was fully convinced that God could do whatever he promises. Now, let me start to throw out this quick line. I don't want to jump ahead, but I'm going to right here. Listen, God may not do something in your life. That's not the point here. But do you believe that he can? Big difference. All right? I'll come back in a moment. All right. So you're in a holding pattern, flying around the airport, and you need some fuel, and that is hope. You know, you've heard me say before that one of my pet peeves is on Facebook. People are praising God because the sun's shining, whatever. I haven't seen a post yet, I'm sure they're out there, where people are praising God when it's not all well. Well, I want to kind of wrap up in Hebrews 6 with 3 benefits to thinking theologically. Number 1, it'll encourage you. It will encourage you. Now, if you want to just write down Romans 15:4 right beside there. So Hebrews 6:18, so that by 2 unchangeable things, in which it's not possible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement. All right, number 2, hope. To hold fast to the hope set before us. And then 3, an anchor for the soul. We have this sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. Now, when this book was written, they did things a little differently. But when you go back in, they didn't have all the locators and the rock, locate rocks and all that when you went into a port and you were in a boat. And a lot of these ports, and the harbors were dangerous. I mean, they had rocks you had to get right through, but you couldn't see them, but they were down in there. And so they would bring a pilot ship out, so to speak, somebody who knew the waters extremely well. They were a native of the area. And then they would come out, and then you would drop your anchor in that boat, and then they would take you through. Now, today, if you go on a cruise ship, it's not unusual to go into a port that has this pretty whatever, and you'll see a boat come out, and sometimes the captain of the ship will come on, and he'll say something like, well, we have, and I forget the exact words, but we have somebody, and then he'll come on board, and he will pilot the ship through to the pier, all right? Same type thing, all right? So when you see that, an anchor for the soul, I want to go back to Thessalonians. Paul said, God cannot lie. What I'm about to share with you is absolutely true. Sounds crazy, but it's going to happen. You cannot lose if you keep your trust in Jesus. He said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. And once again, beyond that, I don't have any other promises. Are you with me? I mean, I do. There's a lot of promises in the Bible, but hang with me here. You may not get that job you so desperately need. I can't promise you that. I can't promise you that your marriage will survive if something bad happens. I can't. I don't know that. I can't promise you that the storm will end early and the sun's going to come out tomorrow. I can't promise you that. And I say that because Paul, as you may recall, wound up being beheaded. I couldn't have promised him that he was going to get out of prison eventually and die of old age like the Apostle John was going to. I mean, the Apostle John was the only one who died of old age. But like Abraham, faith and perseverance are required. As long as you have faith and perseverance, there's hope. Are you with me? Take faith out and your hope's gone. If you don't persevere, if you throw in the towel, hope's gone. So it takes faith and perseverance. The Hebrews 6 passage makes that clear. That's why you continue pressing on. You know why? Because Jesus did. When Jesus went all the way to the cross, persevered all the way to the crucifixion. All the way. All the way. And ultimately, our hope is in Him. We're trusting Christ and Christ alone, His death on the cross, His resurrection to provide eternal salvation, eternal life. That's where our hope ultimately lies. And this hope in the future leads to an incredibly preposterous belief. And I want to start next week with the numbers, not 666, but 109 and 300. But you got to come back. Let's stand for prayer, shall we?